Today on Voice of the Valleys, Ireland is in flames, the grooming gang inquiry is in shambles, and politicians suspiciously are removing their expensive watches so that they can go on about eating and taxing the rich. All that and more today on Voice of the Valleys. Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys. As you can see, it's a little bit of a different setup. We're not in the dining room this time, and I'm back on my other microphone. However, it's on the stand right here, so it's in a nice prominent, just want to adjust it a little bit, nice prominent part of the frame. But Mr. George Cresswell, hope we're all doing well. Hope we're all having a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever we are. Going to get straight into it today because I don't have a lot of time. Lots of important stuff been going on. I know I've been a bit out of the loop recently. I've seen your comments and stuff like that on things that you want me to go over and stuff like that. And I know it's been a very clip heavy and very short heavy at the moment, especially though, however, with the two recent interviews that I've released, one of which has just gone into public YouTube and on public platforms, obviously. That's my recent conversation with Justean Winter. If you haven't already gone and checked out my second conversation with Justean Winter, please do. Not is it a very important and useful and informative conversation. I want it to hopefully eclipse the views and everything that we had on the first one. Justean has my best conversation interview to date so far. Currently on YouTube. In fact, I will get up the number of views it currently has on YouTube a moment. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be weird because I'm going to be looking at my screen down here, but remember to try and speak into the microphone up here. It's going to be very, very odd. I've been using my lapel one the last couple of episodes, obviously, whilst I've been preparing for these interviews, whilst I've been making sure that the equipment is set up, and that's all been downstairs and stuff like that. So, ladies and gentlemen, my first interview with Justean Winter has, where is it? Nearly 2.2 thousand views, 2,191,000 views at time of recording this, which is Wednesday the 22nd of October, 2025 at 25 to 3 in the afternoon. I just want to make sure that it's accurate a moment. Yeah, so there we go. 2,191 views since it was published a couple of months ago. Can't remember exactly when it was published. Thank you to everybody that's obviously tuned in to that. I greatly appreciate it. The feedback on it has been exceedingly positive, and I hope the feedback on this one is going to be exceedingly positive as well. But obviously, with it just having gone out yesterday, it's still less than 100. It's only at 48 views at the moment, according to the YouTube page, or it might be a little bit more if I go into the other one. Give me 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so between 48 and 51, because there's a little bit of a disparity in the stats. So, it'll be linked down below. Please go check it out. If you want to become a member as well, ladies and gentlemen, as I've seen some of you have, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much to those who become members either on Patreon or on YouTube, seeing some of you sign up. And as a result, you'll have seen that there's been some things that have been put on there for you guys as well. So you guys have recently signed up to the Tier 1 membership, which I greatly appreciate. It humbles me greatly to think that you'd be willing to become members of the channel. You think that you get that much value out of it, that you'd be willing to become members of the channel and support the podcast and support the shows in that way. There's actually 2 videos up. One of them was up yesterday, I believe it was, but there's one that is not going to be coming out for non-members until November, I believe. That's also available now to you. I put those up there as a thank you. So one of them is a clip that you got early access to, a clip of my other interview that I've done recently, which is in members early access with John Carr. I really enjoyed that conversation. It's a massively good conversation to be. Made me think about a lot. And also, there's a clip on there from my members-only video of The Last Girl, one of the key themes which we highlight in the book, which is remaining hopeful in times of hopelessness. So make sure you go over and check those out as a thank you for signing up to the members area. And apologies with the locals ones at the moment, guys. If you do go over to locals, there'll be some bits of content on there. However, with the current environment that's on there, they have these really strict limitations, which until you get a certain amount of following, you can't put a lot of video on there. So I've had to take off a lot of the clips that were on there just so I can put the interviews that I've had done up on there. it only allows me to upload about 5 gigabytes per month at the moment on locals, whereas on YouTube and Patreon, as far as I know, it's unlimited. YouTube is unlimited. Locals, until you get a bit of a following on there, until you get a supporter base on there, you have a really limited capacity to upload. So make sure you go and just check out on locals as well. You can join, I believe, partly as a free member, and there's little bits of free content on there as well, I believe. And yeah, just hope you enjoy it. Thank you those who signed up. I really appreciate it. And let me know what you think of the interview with John Carr if you haven't already seen it. It'll be dropping next week. Otherwise, hopefully we got a good couple of interesting interviews coming up in the future for you as well. Now that's all out of the way, ladies and gentlemen. Hey there, guys. So, number 63 is currently in the editing stages. It's going to be coming out very, very soon. Obviously, you're watching it now. This is me coming in after that episode was recorded, because in my haste to get the episode out, I realized there was something I forgot to do, and I was in haste to get it out, or in haste to get it recorded, because I had an important event to go to. So I mentioned in number 62 when we covered Steve Laws's speech at the Patriotic Alternative Conference, or at least part of it, that I misheard what Steve actually said. And as a result, my points, whilst I feel that if they were to be separate points, they would be valid and correct, right? There's certainly an element of resentment growing, right? In the UK, with how much our politicians don't want to deal with the problems, don't want to deal with the colonization and the ethnic cleansing of Britain, right? So yeah, there is growing resentment, but I don't want to attribute that to Steve. So I want to make it known that as a correction of the record, thank you to whoever pointed it out to me, because the sentiment that Steve was giving was very, very different. It's my fault that I misheard him. And ultimately, though, again, it is indeed very difficult to argue with the sentiment that Steve was bringing across, even if you disagree with his political views, even if you don't like him as a character, even if you think he's all these evil things or whatever. Certainly, the case that he's making, where if things carry on going the way they are, our British children are going to be growing up as a hated minority. So not just hating minorities, right, because of what has been allowed to happen to their home, right, to them as a people, but then growing up as a hated minority. It's hard to argue with that when you look at what happened to the Yazidis, for example, when you look at what happened to the Rhodesians, when you look at all of the cases where people have become minoritized, it usually doesn't end well. So I, again, have no arguments with what Steve said in this statement. I just want to make it known, the correction that I got things wrong, and I don't want to misattribute anything to Steve that he did not say. With that said, guys, on with today's episode. Hope you enjoy it. I hope you find it useful. Godspeed. First thing to start off with, violence and whatever else, is what is happening in Ireland at the moment, which is very, very scary indeed. And now, where is it? There we go. I got my tabs the wrong way around. Ladies and gentlemen. So we've got lots to talk about today. We're going to get straight into it, though. In Ireland, you'll have seen Ireland, very sad to see, is on fire at the moment, ladies and gentlemen. That's the only way to describe it. Ireland is, something in my eye, is on fire, is the best way to describe it. Like we saw a couple of months ago with the Ballymena, or Ballymena, however you say it, Ballymena, however you say it, riots that were taking place. There's been another one taking place in the aftermath of what is believed to be another case of the thing that we keep getting told isn't happening again and again and again. One of these quote-unquote asylum seekers, which if you go back and listen to my interview with John Carr, I believe the clip is up now, by the way, or it'll be up this evening, if nothing else. There will be plenty of things you can go to there from John's experience to highlight why these are not asylum seekers, but these more, again, nepo babies and terrorists, if you will, coming over. All men. There's barely any women, barely any children, and they're preying on ours. And a 10-year-old girl was sexually assaulted in Ireland by one of these quote-unquote asylum seekers. As you can imagine, after what happened in Ballymena, is a very similar incident. Ireland is now in flames. Here's an image for you, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a couple of clips from what's going on in Ireland at the moment. But this is the kind of stuff we talk about. If you know anything about the Troubles, for example, ladies and gentlemen, you know that the Irish take this stuff very, very seriously. obviously, there's a lot of conflict that's happened between Ireland and Britain. You know, Britain is in the United Kingdom, right? There's been a lot of conflict that's happened in the past. But this is what's going on at the moment. For those of you who are listening, not watching, what you're viewing on screen at the moment is an image of what is termed as the Garda or Gardaí. It's the Irish police force, basically. And it is... Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a bit out of frame at the moment. It is one of their police vans that has been completely torn apart in a fire. Talking like the metal's been peeled back, the lot, right? So that's one example of what's going on at the moment. But reporting from the Daily Express, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's just called the Express now. Yeah, it's just called the Express. 6 people have been arrested in Dublin after a violent protest outside of an asylum seeker hotel Tuesday evening turned violent. The protest outside the City West Hotel in Sagat, or Sagat, however you say it, comes after an alleged sexual assault on a girl in the vicinity in the early hours of Monday morning. Protesters were displaying Irish flags, chanting anti-immigration slogans and throwing missiles. Garda cordons sustained attacks, including physical violence, bricks thrown and fireworks discharged at the Gardaí, as well as the burning of a Garda van, as I just showed you. There were attempts to charge the Garda line with horse-drawn sulky carts. Meanwhile, a Garda helicopter overhead was targeted with lasers. Not good, because you don't want that, chopper coming out of the sky. It could kill however many, innocent people or whatever. I spoke about the Antifa goons that were doing that to helicopters in America. It's not necessarily good, but this is what happens when the government just decides it's going to go off and do whatever it wants, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to subject its people to this disgusting anarcho-tyranny, if you will. That a 10-year-old girl, I don't think the article actually says how old the girl is, but others have confirmed on social media that the girl is 10 years old, and it is potentially or most likely an African migrant that assaulted her. One of many cases, one of many, many cases. But Keith Woods was on the ground, I believe it was, highlighting some of the scenes, what's going on in Ireland, ladies and gentlemen. Here is some of the reporting from Keith Woods. Obviously, he's just had a documentary that's just released about mass immigration and so on, and the erosion of our culture and the danger it's putting us in. And frankly, it's motivated by genocidal ideology against the British, against Native Europeans, against quote-unquote whiteness, and obviously any white person is grouped up in that by virtue of their skin color. So yeah, we are seeing a race genocide, if you will, attempting to take place, or at least that's what's motivating a lot of our politicians and the people that allow this and encourage it. But I'll throw it to Keith now. Let's see what he has to say.
Here at the protest at City West Hotel, where a migrant, an asylum seeker that was supposed to be deported, stayed in the country and raped a 10-year-old Irish girl that was in state care. And as you can see, things are massively kicking off here. There's probably well over 1,000 protesters. Unfortunately, this isn't the first crime we've seen like this, even in the last year or two. So things are really reaching a boiling point here.
So he said the protest at the City West Hotel. Literally everything's going off, ladies and gentlemen. If you're listening to this, he's speaking it in front of what I believe is the Garda van that's on fire that I told you about, right? Potentially well over 1,000 protesters. This was not just a couple of people going out and causing trouble. This was obviously a very big incident, right? Really goes to show the strength in numbers, right? And that's why one thing I always say, ladies and gentlemen, you never want to see things like this. You never want to see things like this. But ultimately, the only thing that just regular people have to keep their people safe when every other aspect of their government, of protect and serve, is turned on them, right? Seen that in instances in the grooming gangs excerpts and stuff like that, and in the cases that police, you can't trust police anymore. South Wales Police, for example, just arrested a veteran, right? As to the best of my knowledge, just a veteran on a house repossession order. But bear in mind, they didn't have no warrant. They broke down the frigging door and just basically manhandled him out of the house and left it completely exposed. Anybody could have gone in there, right? Didn't tell his family nothing. He didn't even have a warrant, right? Bear in mind, the guy's done 4 tours of Afghanistan. His name's Dale. It's not Dale. Is it Dale Vincent? I think it's Dale Vincent. I'm trying to remember his name. I put it in my post yesterday. Go find my posts on it on X. It was Victoria that made me aware of the news. I know his name is Vincent. I think it's Dale. Awful stuff. And we covered recently that South Wales Police, again, and many other police departments, not just them, right, not just South Wales Police involved in some of these incidents, but allowing paedophile Ian Watkins to do the things that he done without investigating him. And then after they were exposed, after their incompetence was exposed by his ex-girlfriend going and basically turning undercover double agent and putting herself in a compromised position to take him down, she basically, brought herself down, right, by incriminating herself to incriminate him. And then they went on and charged her afterwards. You can say what she done was unethical and all of these things, right, playing into it and all of these things. A little bit like going undercover but then going too far and getting involved in heinous criminal activity yourself. But ultimately, you can make the argument when the police weren't doing anything that's what was kind of necessary, if you will, to bring him down. Obviously, she didn't want to do that. She didn't want to get involved in any of that shit, as far as we know. But that's just, the disgusting depths that she had to bring herself down to, if you will. It's truly awful, just because the police wouldn't do their job. Obviously, we've seen that in the grooming gangs. Police, in many ways, not just aiding the gangs, but in many ways taking their spoils, if you will, themselves. And there was another incident that I brought up with the South Wales Police. In fact, I will go quickly find my post on it, ladies and gentlemen. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, here we go. And yeah, Peter and Avril Griffiths. Peter and Avril Griffiths were the other big ones that were involved as well. Peter and Avril Griffiths were dubbed the Fred and Rose West. You remember this from the last episode as well. They went on a heinous spree of raping children, right? Used to play on Avril's quote-unquote low IQ to lure these girls in. And one of these things was a boat party that allegedly happened. And when these rapes occurred of these children on this boat, there was allegedly police officers on there, and maybe not directly involved, but were indirectly involved. They knew about it and they didn't report it. And Peter himself was a special constable of the South Wales Police, I believe that it was. So the rot goes back very, very far, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, Dale Vincent, that is his name. So say his name, ladies and gentlemen, say his name. This is what happens when you're quote-unquote protect and serve. We were told that give away our guns and we'll be so safe. And then the next thing you know, this has been going on for generations, obviously at this point anyway, it's been going on since the 50s. But, they allowed the police, government, etc., in the name of more political power, in the name of diversity, in the name of multiculturalism, in the name of live and let live, love is love, and all of these other radical left-wing messages of, open borders, utopia, and all the rest of it. That how disgustingly many children got raped, right? Directly sacrificed on the altar of multiculturalism, directly enabled by a tyrannical state and disgustingly morally rotted police departments. And what are people supposed to do? Just sit back and take it? Are they supposed to just sit back and take it? But then when they do react, again, it's problem, reaction, solution. Allow a bunch of migrants in, both legal and illegal means, because you're going to clamp down on digital ID eventually. Get people to react, as you saw in the aftermath of Southport, as you saw in the aftermath of all of these other things. A heinous attack happens. People react, people protest or whatever. You say, far right, Nazi, bigots, all of this stuff. We need digital ID, and boom, you have your reason. Problem, reaction, solution. Right? More scenes coming out of Ireland, ladies and gentlemen. I'll bring these up on screen for you now as well. I won't play them with the volumes. I'll just talk over the top of them. But you can see again, very large gathering of people, flames in the background, a lot. Right. I can't quite see what that sign says. Just looking to try and see what that sign is saying. But again, the one thing you can't fault people for is being angry. That's the one thing that you cannot fault people for, is being angry. Their children are being targeted deliberately and the government won't do anything, as we saw recently. The grooming gangs, thing in the... That's not me fast-forwarding the video, by the way. That's somebody else doing that. So we've seen now that as well, as we'll move on to later on in the show, the grooming gangs... inquiry, the government inquiry, has completely fallen apart, pretty much. 3 of the people that were volunteering, that were victims to help out with it, right, 3 that were on the panel to try and do this, have spoken out on why they have removed themselves from associating themselves with the government inquiry, and it's for the reasons that you can expect. ladies and gentlemen. It's because they're trying to obfuscate from the true nature of it, was that this was ethno-religiously motivated. They're trying to get away from the issues of race. They're trying to get away from the issues of religion. In fact, that is as how these gangs were motivated, right? They acted on the ideology, if you will, of both religious and racial supremacy, right? And they saw these girls as less than animals, right? Because of where they came from, because of their religion, or because of their status as apostates, right? Because, or as infidels rather, as kuffar, right? And then on the race and where they come from. And it was very much motivated by those factors, and the government's trying to broaden the scope of the inquiry, obviously to try and get away from those things, because they still want to rely on those people as a voting bloc, but either that, they have to then admit that they were wrong, or that about all of this stuff, about the open borders experiment, about multiculturalism, about all of this stuff, right? And they have to admit that many of the quote-unquote online right, and just the right wing in general, were right about all of these issues, which they would never ever do. Or they have to admit that they did it intentionally. And in fact, that's the route that they went down. If you remember, Keir Starmer said it was all by design. All those girls that were raped, all of the atrocities have happened, all of the ethnic cleansing of British towns and cities, it's still going on right now. Grooming gangs, rape gangs, still going on right now. All by design. It was deliberate. It was a crime without classification and the magnitude, right? You know, you think, you see the things that happened. You think of like the Soviets rampaging through East Germany and doing the heinous things that they did. The Red Army, as they were moving through East Germany to get to Berlin, the heinous things that, you know, young children and the German women were inflicted upon, right? The heinous, you know, rapes and torture and all the rest of it, which they were obviously doing to their own people back in the Soviet Union as well, right? We've spoken about the terrors of the socialization of women that was going on in the Soviet Union time and time and time again. It's truly, truly awful, ladies and gentlemen. It's atrocity beyond words, absolutely beyond words. And it was all done by design. It's all done by design and enabled by the government, by your councillors, right? By your MPs, MSs, right? They still don't want to have these conversations on the floor of the Senate, right? Saying that the term grooming gang is offensive or whatever, and you wonder why the victims feel so helpless, right? But this is not in any way now a novel phenomenon, ladies and gentlemen. There's stuff going on out in America. I'm not sure if obviously they're dealing with like the amount of children that were trafficked over the southern border with Biden's open border regime, right? If you want to be open for open borders, think about it. So have a think about your open borders position and how much it actually encourages not only illegal immigration, but child trafficking and human trafficking and all the rest of it, right? Think about how much it actually encourages it. If you want to know more about that, go see my conversation with John Carr as well, link down below. Again, you can still get it on members' early access for the rest of this week before it goes up on Monday afternoon. Or Monday evening. I can't remember if it's Monday afternoon or Monday evening, but anyway, they're both kind of the same thing. Don't know if you've seen recently, ladies and gentlemen, you want to know about police aiding terrorists and all of these things, police aiding, which I would class like the grooming gang, you know, rapists as frankly as terrorists. That's what I would classify them as. These were, you know, very well organized groups of people, often in certain communities and families. It was very often family business, if you will, family business in these environments where people who weren't directly involved would cover for them, right? And if they got arrested and they got taken to the police station, they'd go and riot and they'd go and do all these things. They try and basically burn down the police station as a threat to have their person released, right? Even though they've done these heinous crimes and whatnot. They're terrorist cells, and we are absolutely inundated with them all up and down the country, ladies and gentlemen. England in particular, again, all of these areas now where you see the native British person become a minority have had this terror attack subject to them. So I say, this is a terror government, ladies and gentlemen. This is a reign of terror in our government, but they want you terrified. But fear, ladies and gentlemen, is a powerful motivator. Fear will get you to do things that you otherwise wouldn't. Fear is tremendous at getting people to do things that they otherwise wouldn't do. That's another key aspect of the last girl we talked about, ladies and gentlemen, how these terrorists, ISIS terrorists with the Sabias that they had in their captivity tried to play on their fears and all of these things to make them trapped, to make them feel as though if they escaped back to their community that they wouldn't be accepted and all of these things, gaslighting them to no end. If you want to learn more about fear, The Last Girl is the place to go. Member section. Go and watch it now. Or go check out some of the clips. There might be a clip about it coming up in the near future. You can wait around for that. So, in America recently, ladies and gentlemen, Antifa rioters have been throwing explosive munitions and tear gas at DHS agents, so Department of Homeland Security agents, who are attempting to clear the driveway in front of ICE Portland. This was yesterday. This was posted yesterday at 3:33, nice little fitting number, in the morning in the UK, with this from Nick Soto in the USA. Here's now some of this thing, ladies and gentlemen. Ireland is a war zone at the moment, and there's many areas, and in instance, I think this might be Portland. I think, from ICE Portland, I just said, Portland, where this massively infested Antifa terrorist presence, ladies and gentlemen, is also like a war zone. Check this out. Coming on screen now. So you could hear, I'm not sure if the audio cleanup software might have filtered it out a little bit. There's music in the background. They're actually like blaring music off of loudspeakers, right, all across this area. That's not music that the person has added in the background of this video. No, that seems to be actual battle music that they have playing, right? This modern day equivalent of, the trumpets and the drums going into battle, right? You'd had the person with the big flag up behind them on the battlefield that you sort of rally around, right? To find your troops on the battlefield, to find, if you ever got disoriented, you could look to that flag and you can maybe look to the sound of that drum, right? And it can reorient you and get you to regroup so that you can go back again. Again, like an absolute war zone, ladies and gentlemen. I should have put a epilepsy warning on that. I should have said about epilepsy warning before that, I think. But oh well, we'll just go with it. Apologies if that triggered anything for you, ladies and gentlemen. But this is where, again, it seems thing to dunk on Antifa as like these, purple-haired, pronoun-toting socialist goons, right? No, they're dangerous. Make no mistake. That's why we should be putting a lot more focus on Antifa in this country as well. And anybody who identifies as a quote-unquote anti-fascist. They're far more like the fascists they claim to be against than anything like that, right? Because again, communism and fascism towards the extreme ends, they're opposite ends of each other in terms of their mortal enemies, in terms of their ideology, but methods tend to be quite similar, right? You tend to see that horseshoe manifesting, as we've talked about before. But at the moment, we are so inundated in Western countries in particular with this rot of very hard left modern day communism, that anybody who's going on about the far right in this instance, right, again, they're referring to anybody that does not go along with the political orthodoxy, because it's not the far right that are in power in the UK. It's not the far right that are in power in France, inflicting all of this stuff, right? So it's not even the far right that are in power at the moment in America, right? As much as they tried to paint him as a Nazi and everything like that, right? The world is on fire at the moment, ladies and gentlemen, and the only thing is, I don't necessarily see it getting better anytime soon, because the nature, if you're on the quote-unquote right wing, right, the nature is that these people are going to go, they believe in this the same way that they accuse, Christians of being religious and all of these things, right? They hate Christianity, obviously, but they believe in the complete opposite ideas, but with the same fervor, with the same zeal, with the same, what's the word I'm looking for? Radicalization, should we say? Radicalization. I might have just cut a slight pause there. The same way that many religious fundamentalists do, right? And the same way they accuse others of, right? There's always the things that they accuse you of that they're guilty of as well. And these people are simply not able of that kind of introspection and that kind of looking in the mirror, if you will. But you want to know the really thing, ladies and gentlemen, is how deep police departments in particular, and why we should be holding them to a higher standard. We should be pressing more and more and more for either good police to, you know, take the thing, resign, get that badge off you, retain that element of your respect. I once thought that, you know, maybe there's some people that are still on the inside, right, with the police to try and do what they can from the inside, right? Because the only thing is, if they leave their position, they're just going to replace it likely with a foreigner who's just going to toe the line, right? The same way that if a delivery driver decides he doesn't want to do his job anymore, well, oh, that's okay, we'll just get another illegal person in and they'll work for dirt cheap and we can make all the profits, right? Funny how when they talked about cracking down on illegal working, right, that Uber said that it came out and just said, well, this is going to affect our prices because we can't hire, you know, illegal workers. Right, admitting that they were obviously hiring illegal workers, but doing so because it allowed them to pay them dirt cheap wages to undercut the wages of the native Brit who needs, not only deserves, right, but needs a lot more to support a family, to be able to own a house and so on. All things have been done with houses, with BlackRock buying up houses, with people not being able to get houses anymore. It's all a form of involuntary population control. Ladies and gentlemen, all of it is a part of the wider depopulation agenda. So one of the biggest things that you need in order to start a family is a house. You need a stable income source, obviously, and you need a house. That's why so many people are struggling at the moment. It's why our birth rate's been declining, not to mention all of the cultural changes and all the rest of it, normalization of birth control, normalization of killing babies, all the rest of it, and treating it like a religious sacrament. There's all manner of things that are contributing to us dying out as a people, right? But to come back to it, when we're talking about police, for example, just being political enforcement agents, the police in Portland become so corrupt or so, you know, indoctrinated, if you will, ideologically indoctrinated, that they provided cover to some of these terrorists. And somebody pointed out, like, she's, as in the person who we're going to be talking about now, that the Antifa goon ran right behind the police for cover, and they essentially protected her from the Department of Homeland Security. So this is an instance where Portland police, in the same instance we just saw, provided cover to Antifa terrorists and ICE Portland, who were beaming spotlights into DHS agents' eyes and shielded them from DHS. A DHS agent then came out and confronted Portland police, calling them out for allowing terrorists to hide behind them. She's literally running behind you guys, the DHS agent said to a Portland police sergeant. Portland police pretended that they saw nothing at all, although they were just standing 15 feet away from the assailants, which DHS had marked with countless pepper balls, lights and lasers over the course of several minutes. I was 3 times the distance away, and even I saw what was going on. So this is from Nick Soto on X again. Video coming up on screen for you, ladies and gentlemen.
Nice aim. I love that. Whoa. That's a girl.
What did that person do?
They're shining something in the... They're hiding behind the sign. And they're running for cover behind Portland police. Oh my God. You've got to be kidding me.
It's kind of wild. Shoot everybody else to shoot one person.
Pussy got, come on.
You're shining a light, but you get mad at somebody else.
We should be allowed to hear what the fuck they're talking
Nobody
about.
told us anything. We're standing there. We don't know what's going
Oh
on.
my God, is this the coaching of
So it's just like she's literally running behind you.
And we don't know why she's running.
So
Nice. Nice aim. I love that.
whoa.
That's a girl.
Tells you all you need to know, ladies and gentlemen. So those of you who weren't watching and were listening, this is an incident where a Antifa goon was shining a light in the eyes of DHS officers, or was the term used? You use the term officer? I would imagine you do. Are up on this rooftop, shining lights down and firing pepper balls and other manner of non-lethal non-lethal ways of marking their targets, right? And you actually saw that. So when they were firing down from this rooftop, you could see on the video where some of these impacts were landing, and they were landing near the target that they were trying to mark to say this is who we're either coming to get or whatever, right? Or this is our person of interest in this moment. This is our VIP or whatever it is. This is the person we're targeting. And then she then runs for cover under this sort of like entrance to like an underground car park, it looks like, and she's beaming lights up into the eyes of these DHS officers that are on the rooftop. And after that, ladies and gentlemen, she literally, from the middle of the street, runs to the other end of the street, across a sidewalk. Bear in mind, the police are just watching this, right? They're not attempting to help or anything like that. Right, they're not attempting to liaise with the Department of Homeland Security to work out who the target is and apprehend them, right, so that this can all be brought to an end, right? Not to mention the police are on fucking bicycles, right? The police are just there like goons on bicycles with bicycle helmets on, right? Barney's there as well, if you didn't watch the video, ladies and gentlemen. Barney, the purple fucking dinosaurs at this protest, if you didn't see. And there's a person there that's being abducted by an alien as well. Obviously, the people not even taking themselves seriously a lot of the time, or in many ways taking themselves too seriously. And then after that, she runs literally behind the Portland police. So I'll actually see if I can bring this still up on screen for you in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. A still image of this so you can see it. So if I bring this up on screen, again, you would have seen this if you watched it, but maybe you'll be able to time you can pull this up on screen and see it. This is the incident here. The ones you see with the yellow are the police, right? They're wearing their vests. They've got their high visors on, right? This person in the back here, denoted by my cursor, is the person that just run across the street and they've run behind. I'm not sure whether this guy might be a member of the Department of Homeland Security. I don't know, because he's dressed slightly differently and he looks like he's in a law enforcement uniform. This person here, which you can see in the background, very smudged, but she's wearing a gas mask. You can see that's got a hood up, right? Black jacket, black hoodie, is the person that ran, and then the police are protecting her, and then pretended that they didn't know what was going on. So if you think the police are going to do anything for you, ladies and gentlemen, you will be sorely, sorely mistaken. If you put up, now maybe not in the UK so much, because the police have now just made the announcement that they're not going to be pursuing non-crime hate incidents anymore. Yes, police pursuing non-crimes. Yeah, tell me about it, ladies and gentlemen. That's the state that we got to in the UK. All because people were telling the truth and they didn't like it. If you think the police are going to do anything for you, odds are they won't. You probably still have one or two good ones in there, but a lot of the good ones, have resigned or left the force for these exact reasons. Jay Darkmore, who hopefully I reached out to him and we had a good conversation, a little exchange on X. He's a bit busy at the moment, but I asked him would he be able to come on the podcast, talk about this stuff. He said maybe in November he'd be up for coming on in the middle of November. He's really busy at the moment. So hopefully we'll have that interview coming up, ladies and gentlemen. Jay is the person that left the police force after 10 years, quite literally, because he said he wasn't able to help people. Police are doing the opposite of that. They're not helping people. They're doing the exact opposite. Right? Think the police are going to help you, ladies and gentlemen? Odds are they're not. Unless you're a Muslim, or unless you're a BAME person. Oh, wait, I forgot. We can't say that now. With the genocidal language guide, as I'm calling it. With the genocidal language guide that has just been released, ladies and gentlemen, by the Home Office or whatever it is. You know, the inclusive language guide we talked about last time. We said that you can't refer to English native. Right, you can't refer to English native, ladies and gentlemen. And this is a campaign that's been building for a long time against British native ancestry. Right? Even going as far to say that there's no Celtic ancestry, there's no Welsh ancestry, there's no native ancestry of these isles, and it's all been designed to take it away from us, ladies and gentlemen. That's why it's been designed to take it away from us. Everything our ancestors worked to build, everything that makes Wales Welsh, everything that makes England English, everything that makes Scotland Scottish, everything that makes Ireland Irish, right? All the history of the conflicts we've had between peoples and all the rest of it, right? They want to take it all away. And many say they're trying to rewrite history. They rewrite in dictionaries all the time, right? They're going back and rewriting all of these things, right? They're trying to rewrite things that never existed into the books before. Truly something out of 1984. Ladies and gentlemen, truly something out of 1984. And that's why many have become disillusioned, ladies and gentlemen, which brings us to our next story. So we just covered all of the violent stuff that's going on in Ireland and in Portland and America. And obviously this is going, probably many other areas you could mention as well. You know, the silent atrocities that go on along the world every other day. One other one that's not so silent at the moment is the genocide and the massacres that are going on in Nigeria against Christians on the daily, purely for being Christians, right? There's the Uyghur Muslims in China. You know my feelings on Islam, you know my feelings on, you know, Muslims in this country and all the rest of it and all that, right? But again, what the Chinese government are doing to Uyghur Muslims in that area is truly incomprehensibly evil. All manner of atrocity going on at the moment, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously as well, one thing I've started to change my sort of perspective on a little bit. It was one of the things that me and John talked about a lot in our conversation as well. Was you know, what's going on in Gaza at the moment. My perspective has certainly began to change on that a little bit. You know, especially with the stuff John highlighted about when his experience in the forces, for example, how that's played into his views on maybe what the Israeli government did on October the 7th with stand-down orders and all the rest of it, right? The scale of obviously the destruction that's gone on in Gaza, it's not nice. It's not nice, obviously, and you know, kids losing limbs, kids, you know, the ones that are actively, you know, starving and all the rest of it. Don't like it when you see, mind, I will say this, don't still like it when you see that there's so many fat adults in Gaza, it seems, right? And then they name a cafe after the Nova Festival. Obviously, I think this is a classic case, in my opinion, of where the enemy of your enemy doesn't necessarily mean that the person's your friend. Right, I think with regards to what's going on out there at the moment, there's disgusting, heinous things that are obviously going on both sides, right? And not saying that the two are necessarily equivalent or whatever. I'm not in a position to make that judgment. But in terms of Britain's stance on it, see why people just say we shouldn't be involved in any way. We should not be involved. Give me 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. Somebody's at the door. All right, all good. It'd just be a delivery, and I kind of forgot where I was. What I was talking about. What's going on with this thing? There we go. Phone won't stop bloody beeping, man. So, I was saying, yeah, with regards to the British perspective on that issue, I can see why I don't think either side are our friends, right? I don't think because we have a checkered history with Israel, for example. You got to look at the heinous atrocities of the Sergeant's Affair, right? Obviously, they armed Argentina during the Falklands, right? Deliberately. They, you know, one of the spokespeople for Israel recently said that the British have a special place in hell, right, for supposedly turning on Israel and all of these things, right? They literally said that to Tommy Robinson's face in what has increasingly seemed to have turned out as more and more of a humiliation tour. So I know how a lot of people are experiencing that way. A lot of people are trying to defend it and so on. It's not easy to defend, it has to be said. You know, so a lot of things I'm questioning, put it that way. A lot of things that my perspective has broadened on a lot. But one thing which perspective I don't think really should be broadening on, and anybody that's trying to broaden it is trying to do so to, again, contribute to cover-ups and so on. But like I was saying, I don't believe because we have, you know, one side has never been our friend that instantly means the other side is our friend, right? We had attacks on both sides when we had the mandate in that area of the world. We had, you know, Jewish right-wing terror groups. We had Palestinian terror groups. Everyone in that region seemed to hate us as much as they were hating each other. So I say we just leave them to it. I would say, you know, we would just leave them to it. If there are actually genuine atrocities occurring, then yep, keep sounding the alarm on it. Might take a while to get through to people like me, right? We're increasingly skeptical, right? And maybe at one point would have been more biased to one side. But again, if it is the truth, it will stand on its own merit and just keep saying it, you know, keep saying it and keep providing evidence for it. What they don't want to provide evidence for, however, ladies and gentlemen, is the horrific rapes that are going on in the UK with children for ethno-religious reasons. And that is why 3 people who were victims of the grooming gangs themselves, who tried to be a part of the government to actually secure change in an inquiry, have now left. It started off when somebody by the name of Fiona Goddard announced on X, and I'll read you her statement in a moment, or at least part of it, because I believe it's about three X slides long. She sent a letter of resignation to the Victim Survivor Liaison Panel, and she wanted to remove herself from the Victim Survivor Liaison Panel, which operates under the Home Office and the NWG network, letter constituting a formal notice of resignation. Recent developments from the panel have come into conflict with my personal and professional morals. For reasons of conscience and integrity, I am unable to continue with my participation. I have had doubts for a while and have tried to persevere until after a meeting with potential chairs this week. But after these chairs were leaked and seeing myself and the other survivors panicked and suspicious of each other in the aftermath, I realised we should never have been put in that position in the first place. This inquiry is supposed to be a public process and should have been conducted openly and transparently from the start. Survivors' anonymity is obviously of utmost important, and they should be secure in knowing that their personal details and opinions are confidential. The dynamics of this should be secure the dynamics of this inquiry, including potential chairs and progress, should have been conducted openly and honestly by the government, and survivors should have had the choice to voice their opinions if they decided to. Instead, the secretive conduct and conditions imposed on survivors led to a toxic, fearful environment, and there is a high risk of people feeling silenced all over again. As such, I have made the decision to leave the Victim Survivor Liaison panel and not continue with the meetings this week. And what also happened, ladies and gentlemen, as she mentioned later on in her statement, after noting that she had serious concerns about certain members of the panel and their affiliations with members of the Labour government, she mentioned that this inquiry was ordered in June as an independent commission into grooming gangs, specifically grooming gangs, after Baroness Casey's rapid audit, and was supposed to have a specific focus on group-based child sexual exploitation. All survivors of that type of sexual abuse have had their voices and experiences. All survivors of any type of sexual abuse should have their voices and experiences heard if they so choose, so the systems can learn from their lived experiences. This inquiry needs to remain focused on a specific subsection of offending. Grooming gangs or group-based sexual exploitation is a unique crime with its own markers. It often differs from areas of child sexual abuse or child sexual exploitation in that victims have experienced decades of failure from statutory services. Expanding the scope of this inquiry risks it being watered down and once again failing to get to the truth. We have repeatedly faced suggestions from officials to expand this inquiry, and there is real fear from survivors, including myself, that it will turn into another ICSA, I believe it says, IICSA, I'm not sure what that stands for. I would imagine it's independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, I would imagine, with grooming gang victims forgotten. The idea is, ladies and gentlemen, what they're trying to do is they're trying to make it about generalities. They're trying to get away from the fact that this was a specific group of people, largely targeting, in most cases, a specific group of people. Targeting, again, in most cases, another specific group of people for very specific reasons. That's what the government is trying to obfuscate away from, because it is a death blow. It is a death blow to the idea of multiculturalism and integration and assimilation and all of these things, right? The fact that you had about 3% on average of the population, specific population, responsible for over 2/3, well, no, under 2/3, actually, just under 2/3 of child sexual abuse and exploitation cases she mentioned in Operation Stovewood in Rotherham. Is the case she's referring to. That's what the government are trying to get away from. Trying to make it, let's make it more general. Let's not put misinformation out there. Let's make it more general, because obviously everybody offends at the same rate. Well, the results from, for example, Baroness Casey and Operation Stovewood, as one example, blew that out of the water, blew that notion out of the water, but the government's still trying to obfuscate. And it's very, very sad. It's very, very sad. So Fiona herself, according to Telegraph, was raped repeatedly from the age of 14 during her time in children's homes in Bradford in the late 2000s. She was appointed to the Victims Liaison Panel advising the Home Office as it sets up the inquiry by Keir Starmer. In an open letter announcing her resignation, Ms. Goddard criticised the move to select either a social worker or ex-police officer as inquiry chairman, the very two services that contributed most to the cover-up of the national mass rape and trafficking of children. Jim Gamble, former head of a Royal Ulster Constabulary Special Branch in Belfast, and social worker Annie Hudson are the two leading candidates for the position. She said, having a police officer or social worker leading the inquiry would once again be letting services mark their own homework. The short listing of these potential chairs shows that the government's complete lack of understanding of the level of corruption and failings involved in the scandal. It's a disturbing conflict of interest, which absolutely it is, and I fear the lack of trust in services from years of failings and corruption will have a negative impact in survivor engagement with this inquiry. I would not be surprised. Take, for example, there was one example of a young girl, ladies and gentlemen, that was basically forced into this marriage ceremony with this, Muslim foreigner man. I can't remember what the ceremony was called. I believe it was called a niqab. It's either the garment. Yeah, I believe it was. I can't remember because I believe niqab also refers to a garment. I might be getting that term slightly wrong, but it's a kind of Islamic wedding. It's kind of arranged Islamic wedding. And the social worker was present for it. The social worker was present for it, attended this ceremony, and therefore gave her okay for it. Bear in mind, he'd been horrifically abusing her. His family had been horrifically abusing her as well. Basically a Sabia environment is what she was kept in. And the social worker was like, yeah, just say, okay, I'll even go to the wedding. Happy days. What a tremendous occasion. So you can understand why people would be angry, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, there is a clip before, and they were talking on Good Morning Britain, ladies and gentlemen, about how these survivors, they met Jess Phillips, and seemingly all she wanted to do was walk away from the situation. It's quite a long clip, so go on to the sources down below to watch the whole thing. Let's see, what this clip has in store for us. Just to show, ladies and gentlemen, how disgustingly inverted and morally twisted our government are. In fact, they won't even deal with the present cases that we have, and in the same areas they want to open up children's homes. So what's the need for children's homes in these areas is another thing that needs to be addressed. Obviously, the breakdown of the family and all of these things. One of the biggest contributors to this has been the breakdown of the family, obviously. Maybe a weak father in the home, or maybe no father in the home, or, just general broken household or whatever. Truly awful, ladies and gentlemen, truly awful. You can't blame them for feeling like this when every time it comes to do one of these things. Yeah, the government says, when it comes to election season, ladies and gentlemen, we'll deal with the grooming gangs, we'll deal with the grooming gangs, we'll deal with the grooming gangs. There's a political football. A lot of us are sick and tired of it. A lot of us are sick and tired of using multiple generations, potentially millions of raped kids in the name of multiculturalism and diversity. All the while, people who tried to blow the whistle on it, people who tried to do stuff about it, were either killed, right? Some of the victims were killed, but either they were, targeted by these gangs as well, by these communities, right? Targeted for death, right? Families were targeted. Police did nothing. Police, in many instances, joined in on the spoils, if you will. Can't blame then the people for losing faith in the government, right? Which is why I think, for all the talk about it at the time when people were saying, it might have been a publicity stunt or whatever, it does seem that Rupert Lowe's inquiry, the people he's selected for it, are doing a lot of good work. Seems to be that way anyway. But we're never going to get anywhere with this government because they've never been concerned with protecting the victims. They've never been concerned with protecting the victims or getting justice for the victims, or protecting future victims, I should say, future would-be victims. They've never been concerned about that. They'd be concerned with expanding their political power. They'd be concerned with courting foreign voting blocs. They'd be concerned with appearing virtuous, like how tolerant we are. Tolerance is not a virtue. Tolerance is not a virtue. Look how tolerant we are. In many instances, bending over for these foreigners with their arsehole wide open, saying, come and have a go with this at the government level, and then letting those people doing the same thing with people's kids. And in many instances, I know that sounds crass to say it that way, but it's true. It's true when you look at the excerpts and you see what these disgusting subhumans who should be deported in a fucking box to the bottom of the sea have done to these children. We've covered some of the excerpts before. We don't need to go over those again in this one. You can find them in some of my past episodes. The pumps, the branding, keeping them in cages. Disgusting things. Absolutely disgusting things from disgusting people. From disgusting people. And it should not be a crime and a harassment thing to say that. It's just true. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't care who it offends. This was Jess Phillips recently on the floor of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. She's going on about basically losing her shit, right? Lack of parliamentary language, I believe what it was called, or lack of parliamentary conduct. and basically accused, saying about her response to this was because she didn't want the victims going on and spouting misinformation. So that's what it's always all about.
Minister. Can I just be completely clear? I'm suggesting that I will listen completely and utterly to the feedback from the victims that were and still are on. That they are not spreading misinformation at all. But his interpretation is a brilliant case in point, because I will be completely honest. The conversation with Oldham is, do we not think it might be better for them just to take part in a statutory inquiry? That it is absolutely nothing to do with the idea that Oldham is telling me what to do. And the more people from that side, he can hold up his paper and have a smug face all he likes. But the fact of the matter is that there is absolutely no council in this country who will tell this inquiry where it can and cannot go. I have said that
Seems like a lot of hollow words when nothing has happened because of it, ladies and gentlemen. But what was her opening statement? Oh, yeah, we need to make sure that the victims are not spouting misinformation. That was her chief concern. That was her chief concern, what I took away from that. That's obviously why they want to broaden the scope of the inquiry. That's why they want to get away from the race motivations. They want to get away from the religious motivations. We cannot let that, ladies and gentlemen. We cannot let that happen. We have a duty not to let that happen. We fail the victims as well. If we allow this conversation to be diluted again from the blatantly obvious motivations, right? Not only behind the government with the diversity and the ethnic cleansing of English at the moment, but it's coming for all of our towns, communities. Make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen. Which is why we need to be proactive about it. The English in many instances now are being reactive about it. They have to take things back. We in many instances can be proactive about it. We can see what's going on if they're saying, no, we don't want any of that. We can do stuff about it now. I think it's time for Jess Phillips to absolutely resign. I don't think she will. Because I don't think she has any shame over this. Genuinely don't think she feels any shame whatsoever. Focus again, protecting the narrative, protecting the multicultural baby, protecting the diversity baby, protecting the Islamophobia baby, protecting the immigration baby, all of these things. That's where this, very sad, very resentful, warped by feminism, mothering nurture energy is gone. Sadly, it's us that all suffer for it. That's why these people need to be removed, ladies and gentlemen. And we should not feel guilty about it. We should not feel guilty about removing these people. In some instances from their positions of power, in many instances from the country. Many of them in a box, like I said. Sadiq Khan has been exposed of basically covering up the grooming gangs in London because he's apparently read excerpts of what was going on, despite at the same time denying them, ladies and gentlemen. From the Express again, Sadiq Khan grooming gang cover-up exposed as new evidence has been revealed. Sadiq Khan has been accused of covering up evidence of grooming gangs in London after an Express investigation. The Mayor of London read reports of young girls being raped in hotels by groups of men, whilst publicly denying there were any grooming gangs in the capital. Susan Hall famously took him, I believe it was Susan Hall, took him to task over this, and he said, I don't know of any of these gangs operating in London. It's a paradise.
I asked you this question last week, and you found every which way but not to answer it. Just how many grooming gangs have we got in London?
To avoid any misunderstanding, can she define what she means by that?
Yes. If you look at what's gone on in Rotherham, where there are people taking young girls, grooming them for sex, that is what I'm talking about.
We know in London there are issues about exploitation of young people, but they're not as defined by the member in her definition of what those types of gangs are.
So are you saying we haven't got the same sort of gangs that are in Rotherham, Bradford and lots of other places in the country?
Just for you misunderstanding, what does she mean by that?
You know full well what I mean by that. It's all over the television. You know exactly what I mean by that. These gangs of people that are grooming young girls for sex. Do we actually have those in London?
I'm unclear, Chair, what is meant by the question. If you could spell it out, I can answer.
I've just spelt it out. Are you not listening? It's the sort of gangs that groom young girls at a young age for sex. Exactly how much clearer do you want me to be?
You know, London, where a rape is occurring every hour on average, mind you, possibly even more now, you know. These trends don't seem to be getting any better, right? It's one of the worst places, many of it one of the worst places to live. So many are fleeing the cities, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, many are fleeing the cities to areas like mine. But this is the mayor of London, no surprise, having the motivation to do it, giving he's a foreigner himself, right? Giving he's a Muslim himself. Probably shouldn't say that, actually. Given he's a Pakistani Muslim himself, right? That was non-parliamentary language, wasn't it? Whilst covering up the grooming, whilst saying that there were no grooming gangs in London, was reading excerpts, was reading reports of them happening. You'll find this link down below, ladies and gentlemen. Children were plied with drugs and had their lives threatened. Grooming gang whistleblower, it was Maggie Oliver in this instance, told the Express that the cases followed the same pattern that she had seen with Greater Manchester Police's cover-up of the Rochdale scandal, and Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp accused Sadiq Khan of being part of a cover-up that calls for accountability. Lee Anderson has also weighed in. The Mayor and the Metropolitan Police have consistently claimed that no reports of Rochdale or Rotherham-style grooming gangs in the capital, with Khan suggesting there was no indication that they existed. In pages of 4 different His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services reports from 2016 to 2025, we found details of 6 potential victims. Based on the ground assessments of the Met's handling of sexual abuse cases from the start of Khan's tenure to this year, the Inspectorate reports explain, often in horrific detail, how police were slow to react to evidence for girls as young as 13 years old, exploited by gangs, predatory men. There's no words, really, is there, ladies and gentlemen? There's no words. There's absolutely no words. That's why we'll never get justice from the government. I firmly believe that. We'll never get justice from the government. Absolutely not. Justice is going to come from private inquiry, private investigations, and other means outside of, you know, I don't want to say judiciary, because obviously you want all these people to see trial and whatever, get convicted, and then obviously find their way springing at the end of a rope or whatever. But it's not going to come from the government, it seems. Or at the very least, it's not going to come from any of the governmental options that we have. Nigel Farage, whether it's because he wants to get in with the SW1 crowd, or whether it's because he's doing 4,000 IQ chess moves of getting himself just to the point where he seems, you know, establishment enough to where enough people will vote for him from all sides. He'll get in, and then he'll, you know, turn into this massive populist, you know, nationalist leader, right? Who's going to deal with all these things and, you know, not to say, you know, Trump things, but, you know, like Trump made the classic remark of saying he's going to be a dictator on day one, for example, for the border, right? He's going to be, you know, a dictator with regards to these gangs and really get justice for the victims, right? I can't see that happening. The only person that's really done anything of note so far, at least tried to, is Rupert Lowe. And Nigel Farage hasn't seemingly backed that investigation, likely because of personal grievances. Sad to see. Sad to see. But that's why, ladies and gentlemen, as they try to lie, as they try to gaslight, as they try to obfuscate, as they try to move the narrative away to a point where they feel more comfortable with it, we must not let it happen. When people try to say, then they try to get off on these little ideas of getting slightly off the mark so that they can, you know, give them an inch, they'll take a mile, right? Affirm a pronoun, you know, use a pronoun. Next thing you know, you have to let them have all your privileges, right? They'll take they'll take your spaces, they'll take your all of these things, right? Your safety, you know, in the trans issue, for example. Affirm their pronoun. You're basically saying, yep, I believe what you're saying is true. Therefore, you have access to everything that I do, even though it's not true, right? If you're a female, for example, that's why the discourse must be kept meticulously on track. In the context of the trans issue, it means refusing to use preferred pronouns. That's the start of a slippery slope. I talked about that with James S's as well. Tremendous conversation we had about that. Not only that, ladies and gentlemen, on this issue, the motivators for the gangs, religious motivations and ethnic motivations. Those are the two main ones. it has to be kept on track with those meticulously. Any deviation from that, ladies and gentlemen, cannot be allowed. It will be the start of things where they try to detract more and more and more. And another thing where these issues likely played in, ladies and gentlemen, was in the tragic murder that happened earlier on this year, I believe it was, of a schoolboy, Harvey Willgoose. And the teenage killer of Harvey Willgoose has just been named for the first time, and it confirmed everything we knew at the time. Confirmed everything people were saying at the time. And a lot of people were saying it was misinformation, speculation, all of these things. The Harvey Willgoose, young man, right, I can't remember exactly how old he was at the time. This is on BBC, you can go and find it. It's live reporting. Teenage killer of Harvey Willgoose named for the first time. And it is Muhammad Umar Khan. Could have guessed. Who could have guessed, ladies and gentlemen? They said he acted in anger, so these are prosecution reports now. He carried knives into school before the stabbing. Right? Prosecutor Richard Tyne says that tells the court there is no evidence that Khan genuinely feared an attack from Harvey Willgoose. Yeah, it seems though we have our very own Austin Metcalf situation here. Khan's actions were ultimately in anger or retaliation rather than self-defense. He notes that multiple blows inflicted upon Harvey, says Khan, had clearly intended to harm the 15-year-old. He was 15 years old. How many more? Remember the old line from the Vietnam War? LBJ, LBJ, how many kids you killed today? How many more of ours are going to go, Starmer? Is what's happened so far not enough? You can't even necessarily just blame Starmer for this, obviously. Starmer's the one in power at the moment. He could change things tomorrow if he wanted to. He's not going to. Obviously, you're not going to, are you? But this is obviously generations of problems. This is how much is why, sadly, it's very sad, the solutions to these problems are going to be drastic as well. I don't think people are prepared for that. I don't think people are prepared for that. That is, what could be coming next is a genuine prospect that keeps me up at night, 'cause it's going to be ugly. The restoration and the rectification of these problems, if you will. Rectification. I hope that makes sense. I hope that's a word. It's not going to be pretty. I kind of fear that. I do. I look forward to, for example, the people of England. It's not so much of a problem as far as I know in areas like mine. For the people of England, for example, going through atrocity after atrocity after atrocity in the cities, for example, being ethnically cleansed from their towns and from their cities. I can't wait for them to be free of these plagues and these invaders. Can't wait. It's going to be ugly. This is a war, ladies and gentlemen. Make no mistake. This is a war. It's claiming people like the rape gang victims. It's claiming people like Harvey Willgoose and Bailey McLaren and Batley school teacher. And ultimately, if it's pretty much a sure win that we will, but if we don't win, we lose everything, ladies and gentlemen. We have nowhere we can go to. We have no other homeland we can go to. A lot of these people, they can go back to their countries of residence. They can go back to the countries of their ancestry. We can't. This is our country of our ancestry. This is our last holdout. This is our last stand. This is our Gallipoli, if you will. This is our, Dunkirk, and we better make sure we don't fucking lose it. Right? Otherwise we lose everything. And one thing that I used to say before, ladies and gentlemen, realizing that I can't really say it anymore, you can't really use this argument anymore, and I am going to have to go in a moment, ladies and gentlemen, I'm already running behind, is I used to think that maybe we could, have it just be, Christians or whatever, coming in from other areas of the world and whatnot. Realizing now that's actually not going to work whatsoever. Maybe after we've sorted our problems out, maybe some genuine asylum seekers for a little while, maybe some people from Nigeria temporarily, until, the Boko Haram problem can be sorted out. I can understand why people would even be objecting to that, with how much we've been subject to over the last 100 years nearly. But what you're seeing is people trying to game the system. people trying to gain the system. So Telegraph has reported asylum seekers baptized in migrant hotel bathtubs. Conversion to Christianity abused on an industrial scale to support the asylum claims, says Shadow Home Secretary. Migrants are being baptized in asylum hotel bathtubs. You wonder why people are getting really, tired in a way of the way at least Christianity is manifesting in this country. Quote unquote Christianity. Tell me churches that elect female archbishops and all the rest of it, right? But they're being done by a Christian charity. Trying to, again, help these people to take over, whether they realize it or not. They probably think they're doing a good thing. They're really not. And Cardinal Robert Sarah will tell you that. Asylum seekers have undergone baptisms in taxpayer-funded accommodation despite concerns that Muslim migrants are only going through the process to gain asylum. It would be well within the process of taqiyya, ladies and gentlemen. Be well within the process of taqiyya that permits them to lie in order to further their political aims. Right? Which in this instance is turning Britain into one part more of the Islamic Caliphate. So of course they're going to game the system. That's why, sorry ladies and gentlemen, eventually the more and more you scrutinize the question around immigration, remigration, all the rest of it, you will inevitably come back to the only one that it seems the infinite regression of this. Can't have it on religion because people will game the system. And then you get to the term ethno-nationalists, right? And they're supposedly these far-right nationalists and all the rest of it, right? But ethnicity is the one thing which nobody can change no matter what. This is down to your very blood. That is, whether you want to admit it or not, where the buck will stop. That is where the buck will stop. And that's really then, once you really scrutinize it enough, it's kind of the only one that really makes sense. It's kind of the only one that really makes sense. And as I'm starting to come around to see how people are seeing this a lot more now, by the way, it is that ultimately when you scrutinize the position enough and enough and enough, and where you're going to get to the point where it actually makes logical sense, at least in the context of Britain, where it does have its distinct peoples that make up its ancestral history and a certain people's ancestral homeland or homelands, the buck stops there, unfortunately. It's a bit like, again, I believe it was Robert Sarr was quoted as saying that to the Polish people, for example, in one of his interviews or one of his public speeches or whatever, you're Poles first, then Catholic, then European. Because people could leave Catholicism. People could leave Orthodoxy. People could leave Protestantism. You could become an apostate of all different manner of faiths. You become an atheist, right? No matter where you are in the world. You could go to anywhere in the world. But your blood will trace you back to a certain place, a certain heritage every single time. That is immutable. And that's just the reality of the situation. It shows you how people will game things like this, which is why, sadly, even something like, oh, okay, well, Christian immigration is okay. How do you know they're really Christians? And ultimately, you cannot get around the ethnicity question. You cannot get around the points about ethnicity when you get to the nuts and bolts of it. Once you get down to the barest, the barest elements of it, of what people make up certain nations and whatnot, you inevitably run up against ethnicity. That's just the reality, unfortunately. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, last note, because all of these politicians, mind you, which want to take everything from you, all the while saying, tax the rich, rich pay their fair share, all the rest of it, even though you could argue the rich are already paying more than their fair share, right? A lot of the public services we have are only made possible because of how much in taxes the rich people pay, right? If they were all of a sudden to leave, there'd be a massive shortfall that me and you would have to make up that we would never ever be able to make up. And oh boy, the serfdom that would happen as a result. The poverty, the how immeasurably worse things could get from how they are now. Surprisingly, how many people have stuck around as it is, ladies and gentlemen. Many of them, many as you could probably say, are getting kickbacks from these charities or kickbacks from these organizations and governments that are facilitating these agendas. But it's quite interesting to see how shameless our politicians are, ladies and gentlemen. This popped up on my feed. 2 examples, ladies and gentlemen, of how your politicians are completely fake. One example was a French politician caught on camera taking off his expensive watch before he went on TV to complain about the rich people, as you can imagine. Pure champagne socialist, ladies and gentlemen. The youngest deputy of the French National Assembly, Louis Boyard, takes off his watch and hides it in his pocket just before launching criticism at the rich in front of the cameras. It'd be so funny if we weren't suffering so much, ladies and gentlemen.
National. Voilà, qu'on va suivre évidemment en direct. Rejet donc de la motion de censure de la France Insoumise. Il manquait 18 voix. Marie Chantreux.
Louis Boyard, député de la France Insoumise, Louis Boyard.
Parce que dans le même temps, il y a des gens qui regardent ça de haut en souriant. C'est les ultra-riches. Là aussi, il est le cœur du problème. Quand on élabore un budget, on le fait sur la base de la réalité de la vie des gens.
Truly shameless, ladies and gentlemen. So for those of you who didn't watch it but were listening, he's in the corner of the camera, probably doesn't think he's being recorded, and he takes off. He realizes he's wearing what appears to be a very expensive watch. Don't know what brand it is, Rolex or whatever. Rolex typically the easy one to say, right? But I have no idea what brand it was. But he takes it off, not thinking he's being recorded, and slips it into the pocket of into his back pocket of his trousers. It looks like. I thought it was into his waistcoat initially, to the back pocket of his trousers. Before then going on to say, these are the people who look down on it with a smile. It is the ultra rich. Here too, it is the heart of the problem. When you get a budget of the reality of people's lives, and then that's where the clip cuts off. That's where the clip cuts off them. Need I say any more? Need I say any more about how fake, and our politicians won't stand by their convictions anyway? How it's all a pantomime. So people criticizing me because I said British politics in the UK or politics in Europe and whatever is all a pantomime at the moment, because Zach Polanski, who seems to be pushed to the fucking moon at the moment, is unreal. He must have Vince McMahon as his backstage person, pushing him to the fucking moon, right? It's completely and utterly fake. A complete pantomime. He had an acting coach a lot, right? This was to show them when Donald Trump goes to speak at the UN, his teleprompter's not working, and he just, rats off speech that circulates around social media and resonates with so many people, right? Yeah, say what you want about him, the guy can speak, right? The guy can speak, and he speaks well. May disagree with his points and whatnot, may disagree with his demeanor, how he conducts himself, but at least he didn't need a teleprompter. But this guy, Louis Boyard, or whatever his name is, just taking instruction, just following after the example of France's dear leader, Mr. Macron. Because he done the exact same thing. For whatever reason, assuming here that he might be again preaching about the evils of the rich and so on, and how virtuous socialism is and all the rest of it. Again, arm mysteriously disappears under the desk. Next thing you know, comes up and a very expensive watch is all of a sudden missing. This is how stupid your politicians think you are. Ladies and gentlemen, don't fall for it.
Il y a les blocages, et les blocages, il faut pouvoir les lever quand ils empêchent l'activité normale. Et c'est pourquoi d'ailleurs, c'est pourquoi j'ai demandé au gouvernement d'essayer au maximum de négocier et ensuite de réquisitionner. Ce que nous avons pu faire sur les ordures ménagères, par exemple, dans certaines grandes...
I honestly thought you wouldn't notice, ladies and gentlemen. So here is the side-by-side. I'll bring it up as a freeze frame. Here's the side-by-side. And you can see in a moment here. I don't know why the first part of the video was completely silent. You can see here in fact, I'll play it without the volume. You can see here, ladies and gentlemen, that he's wearing the watch here, that he's not on the right. He's wearing it, hand dips under, comes together. Couple of seconds later, very suspiciously, what looks to be a very nice, very expensive watch is all of a sudden missing. This is how stupid they think you are. Eat the rich, eat the rich. Just not us as the rich, and just not the rich people we like that are funding all of the agendas that we are getting very rich off the back of, that are making you poorer and poorer every single day. Thank you very much for watching, listening, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you find it useful. Hope you enjoyed it. Catch up with you next time. Apologies for the lack of uploads and so on. Please go and check out the interviews. Please share them. Again, I want if possible, the Justean Winter interview to eclipse the views and the response of the first one. I greatly appreciate it. Anybody that can share it and whatnot. Shares is going to be the biggest thing. I encourage your friends to watch it and so on. Especially the interview with John Carr, which if you're not a member will be coming up next week. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I got to go because I'm already running very late, and I will see you again very soon. You take care now. Godspeed.